Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Russia. We have lots of very important updates from this area. Putin-Witkoff talks conclude after 3 hours of constructive dialogue. President Vladimir Putin and US envoy Witkoff held a 3-hour meeting described as constructive by Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov. The two sides reportedly discussed the possibility of restarting direct negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. This is a very important question because, according to Russians, Zelensky is no longer a legitimate president of Ukraine. So that is why the Russians try to understand who will be from the Ukrainian side when time comes to sign agreement. According to Ushakov, the talks helped bring Russian and American position closer, not only on Ukraine but on a range of other international issues. Now let's discuss the United States of America, because today, according to information we have, Trump has already arrived to Rome, but let's discuss things that happened before. Witkoff had a good meeting in Russia. Trump assessed his special invoice meeting in Kremlin as good. Another important statement made by Trump: the situation remains very fragile. Donald Trump described the situation around the peace settlement in Ukraine as he traveled to Rome for the funeral of Pope Francis. We are going to meet with many foreign leaders. They want to meet. Trade deals are going very well. I think Russia and Ukraine, I think they are moving forward. We hope. The situation remains very fragile. Another important statement from him: no deadline. I just want to do it, negotiate peace in Ukraine as soon as possible. Yesterday he said that in 2 weeks it would be necessary to ask the question about the US withdrawal from the peace process, but now we see that Trump is trying to change his opinion. And in this video, for example, we can see how President Trump and First Lady Melania board the presidential VC-25A for flight to Rome. They will attend the funeral of Pope Francis tomorrow. So this article was published yesterday, and today, according to information we have, Donald Trump has already arrived on the territory of Rome. And according to information we have, the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, has already arrived on the territory of Rome for the same procedure. And for example, today Donald Trump has already made his first statement when he landed. Just landed in Rome, a good day in talks and meeting with Russia and Ukraine. They are very close to a deal, and the two sides should now meet at very high levels to finish it off. Most of the major points are agreed to. Stop the bloodshed now. We will be where it is necessary to help facilitate the end to this cruel and senseless war. So most likely today is going to be a very interesting day. Most likely today the meeting between the president of the United States of America and Ukraine can take place. But once again, Zelensky after this meeting also made lots of very important statements, and first of all he was talking a lot about Trump's plan. Zelensky continues to resist Trump's plan for territorial concessions to Ukraine. Only the people of Ukraine decide which territories belong to Ukraine. A Ukrainian president said that he would not comment on Trump's statements, but stressed that Kiev's positions remains unchanged. All temporarily occupied territories, including Crimea, belong to Ukraine. This is in both the constitution and international law. As for NATO, Zelensky noted, accession depends on allies, but Kiev continues to insist on security guarantees similar to those that the United States provides to Israel. So this is the position of the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky. You know that of course we understand that this situation can't, let's say, keep endless. Sooner or later all these things will be finished. And for example, today we continue receiving different statements from Trump as well. Ukraine, headed by Vladimir Zelensky, has not signed the final papers on the very important rare earth deal with the United States. It is at least 3 weeks late. Hopefully it will be signed immediately. Maybe this document will be signed in Rome. Work on the overall peace deal between Russia and Ukraine is going smoothly. Success seems to be in the future. At the same time, we got a very important article published by Bloomberg, and I would like to point your attention. Today we got a report that Ukraine is an easy target for Russian hackers after US aid pullback. Bloomberg reports that US has already curtailed all assistance to Ukraine in the field of cybersecurity. Specialists have left, contracts have been cancelled, and the necessary software and hardware have not been delivered. So this is a very important article because today we start receiving updates from from Kiev itself, massive failure of online services and terminals. It seems that a large infrastructure facility that served financial institutions as a postal carrier, etc., is not working. People's Deputy Fidenko. What is known as for now. Novaya Poshta writes about technical difficulties on the contractor's side, but emphasizes that this is not a hacker attack. Kiev State Administration writes about the technical failure at Ashad Bank. Fires are unavailable at Metro and the Turnit cells. So the Ukrainians are saying that they can't use payments. They can't use payments via Apple, Google Pay, and not proceed. And lots of applications are not working right now. So maybe this is already the consequences of US, let's say, pullback at cybersecurity assistance. Now let's move to the line of combat contact. We have lots of very important statements, very important articles, and probably the most important one is coming from the Kursk direction. In this video, we can see the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, and he held a meeting at the command post of the group of forces Kursk. So you know that since the beginning of the special military operation, the Russians created several group of forces. First, there were the group of forces Center, West, East, and South. Later, the Russians added an additional group of forces Dnipro. Later, the Russians created another group of forces North. And today, according to information we have, the Russians created another group of forces, and this is the group of forces Kursk, which most likely is going to operate in the Kursk direction. So the Russians officially today, on the 26th of April of 2025, officially stated that there is another group of forces by the name of Kursk, which most likely is going to continue offensive operation after clearing the Kursk region, to continue offensive operation in the Sumy direction. As for the beginning of the 26th of April, we have lots of updates, and the most important updates are coming from the settlement of Garnal, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. This night we got additional geolocations where we can see additional episodes how the Russian troops and soldiers were attacking the settlement of Garnal from many directions, and based on several geolocations that were provided today, we have adjusted the map once again. The sources reported yesterday that the clashes for the village of Garnal were about to be finished, but there are several buildings and streets and positions that are still under complete Ukrainian control. Anyway, we expect that these upcoming days, the final day of the battle for the settlement of Garnal, and most likely then the group of forces Kursk will continue their offensive operation further deep inside of the territory of Ukraine. And once again, according to geolocations, according to lots of updates, we believe that the Russians are planning to attack from the settlement of Garnal in the southern directions towards three villages. We are talking about Velika Rybitsa, Zapsilya, and Miropolye. Why is that? First of all, during the previous night, the group of forces North made another important statement on their official Telegram channel, and they stated that the Russians destroyed a bridge that Ukrainians used to supply and support their forces in these three villages. For example, this is the moment when the Russians were destroying this bridge. As a result of FPV drone attack, the bridge was completely destroyed and reduced to ruins. So now Ukrainians have no possibilities to supply their forces on the territory of the settlement by the name of Zaptsilla and the settlement of Miropolye. Ukrainians have possibility to do this. Let's be clear with this. They have just this road for these purposes, but as you can see, this road goes probably in some bad direction without normal roads that Ukrainians can use to supply and support their forces. And now another important thing, that this village is encircled by rivers. So this is the river of Psol that goes from the settlement of Garnal in the southern direction, and this river, as you can see, surround the settlement of Zaptsilya from the south, from the east, from the northeast, and then this river also goes in the southwestern, western, and the northwestern directions. So as you can see, this is the only road that Ukrainians can use. The bridges were destroyed, and now the Russians, after the end of the battle for the settlement of Garnal, will most likely continue moving further in the southern direction with the purpose to establish complete control over this territory. If the Russians are able to establish complete control over the village of Zaptsilya, most likely the Ukrainians will be forced to fall back from the settlement of Miropolye, because from this very moment the Ukrainians would be caught in pincers or even in cauldron in this pocket. And the control over the settlement of Zaptsilya will allow the Russians to cut this salient as well, and to maintain the lines between the Belgorod direction and the Kursk direction. So we believe that this is the first, let's say, target of the Russians, of the group of forces Kursk in the Sumy direction. And this is not something like a major offensive with the purpose to establish control over the city of Sumy itself. It's just the, let's say, way how the Russians are trying to create a secure zone along the border between Sumy and Kursk region. So probably this is the first stage to create secure zone. At the same time, there are still very heavy clashes on the territory of Oleshny. The Ukrainians introduced additional forces in the vicinity of the settlement, trying to slow down the Russians and not to allow the armed forces of the Russian Federation to enter Sumy region and to move further in the direction of the settlement by the name of Yunakivka. So there are also very heavy clashes, and we expect that the Russians will try to create secure zone in this part as well. And now let's move further. As for the Belgorod direction, today several pro-Russian resources reported that the Russians managed to improve their positions and to clear the settlement of Demidovka and Popovka completely. So Ukrainians, according to very reliable pro-Russian resources, control just 3 lines and forest belts along the border and nothing more. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Liman direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. According to information we have this morning, the Russians began major offensive operation in the direction of the settlement by the name of Nova. Currently there are very heavy clashes for this settlement. The Russians are attacking this territory from the north, northeast, east and from the southeast. Katerinovka area, the locals confirmed that fighters from the 144th Motorized Division are storming the village of Nova from several directions at once. The last stronghold in front of the settlement has been taken and several houses on the outskirts have been secured. Fighting is also underway for an area near the roads in front of Redka Dub. Earlier, artillery from the 283rd Regiment destroyed a Ukrainian dugout and 2 armored vehicles here. So there are very likely, that's very high chances that today the village of Nova would be captured and secured completely. Now let's move further. As for the Konstantinovka direction, probably today for the first time since the beginning of the Russian offensive operation, we haven't received almost anything from this area. Just several updates of Russian FPV drone attacks and artillery strikes from the Ukrainian side. As for the Pokrovsk direction, during the previous day we got a lot of very important updates. First of all, the Russians resumed their attempts to move further from this pocket in the northwestern directions towards the settlement of Sergeyevka. The Russians began bombing and attacking the positions of the armored forces of Ukraine with the use of FABs further in the north from the settlement of Kotlina, which means that the Russians are moving focus and the Russians are about to resume their attempts to attack further with the purpose to get as close as possible to the next railways and to cut the settlement of Sergeyevka from the settlement of Pokrovsk. At the same time, we start receiving updates that the Russians began offensive from the settlement of Nadiivka in the northwestern direction with the purpose to establish complete control over the settlements of Novoalexandrievka and Novosergeyevka. I'll remind you that first report we got yesterday, several pro-Russian resources published that offensive started, but without any geolocations or any proofs, and today we got proofs, both proofs and geolocations. In this video we can see Russian vehicles, lots of Russian vehicles that were moving towards Ukrainian positions using different and several roads of attacks. We see in this video how the Ukrainians were trying to slow down and to stop the Russians. Anyway, we had several geolocations. One of them was geolocated in this point, and several neutral mappers reported that the Russians managed to move much further in the northwestern direction. Currently, the Russians are at, let's say, 2 kilometers to the settlement of Novoalexandrievka. So the Russians managed to shorten the distance, obviously. As for the South Donetsk direction, during the previous nights, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, the Russians managed to improve their positions on the outskirts of the settlement of Andrievka, taking under control several positions in the fields, and the Russians are about to resume their attempts to attack in the Shakhterskaya direction, Shevchenko direction, sorry. Today we got this video, and in this video we can see how the Russians were bombing and attacking and basically reducing to ruins the villages by the name of Novopol and the village by the name of Abratne. So we see that the Russians carry out something like artillery preparation. I'll remind you that during the previous weeks the Russians attacked the settlement of Shevchenko, but that attack was repelled by the Ukrainians, and now we see that the Russians first of all decided to maintain the lines by attacking the villages along 0510 road. We're talking about the settlement of Novopol and the settlement of Terminovka. So by establishing control over these villages, the Russians will be able to improve their positions and to increase the length of the front line. And that's it for today, for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.